The grace of beginning again, when God rebuilds what you lost. There comes a moment in every life when something we've carefully built, relationships, dreams, a career, even our own sense of identity, begins to crack. And when it finally collapses, the weight of the loss feels unbearable. In those moments, we hear a quiet question in our soul. How do I begin again? Tonight I want to share a story that reveals a truth many of us forget. God specializes in rebuilding lives from the ashes, not the same as before, but stronger, deeper, and filled with grace we never imagined. His name was Mason. For 15 years he poured his life into a small business. He started from nothing, a little workshop where he crafted wooden furniture by hand. People loved his work because each piece wasn't just made, it was cared for. His shelves carried the scent of pine and varnish, the quiet music of sandpaper and hand tools, and the kind of dedication you can't teach. That workshop was his pride, his livelihood, his expression of beauty in a world that often feels rushed and mechanical. But one winter night, everything changed. A faulty electrical wire sparked a fire. By morning, the building was gone, reduced to blackened beams and piles of ash. Mason stood in front of the ruins wearing his jacket over pajamas, trembling in the cold, watching firefighters shake their heads. Just like that, his life's work vanished. That day, something inside him collapsed too. He wasn't just grieving a building. He was grieving his identity, his purpose, his sense of direction. For weeks, he walked through his days numb, moving like someone whose soul had been drained. The insurance would cover only a small part of the loss. Rebuilding seemed impossible. The thought of starting over felt like standing at the bottom of a mountain with no strength left to climb. Friends told him, "You can do it again." But inside he whispered, "I don't have anything left." One evening, overwhelmed by discouragement, Mason walked into the ruins of his workshop. The smell of smoke still lingered. Charred wood creaked under his feet. He stood in the silence, staring at the debris that once held his dreams. He covered his face with his hands and cried, raw, exhausted, honest tears. And then, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was his elderly neighbour, Mr. Reyes, a retired carpenter who had watched Mason grow from a young apprentice into a master craftsman. "Mason," he said softly, "do you know what's stronger than wood?" Mason wiped his eyes. "What?" "Wood that has gone through fire." He pointed at a blackened beam lying in the ashes. "That piece there, it looks ruined. But inside the core is harder now. Fire doesn't only destroy. Sometimes it purifies. Sometimes it strengthens." Mason stared at the beam, unsure what to feel. Mr. Reyes continued, "You are seeing loss, but God sees foundation. What burned wasn't your gift, only the place where you used it." They stood there in the quiet night, smoke rising like a prayer from what remained. Then Mr. Reyes said words that pierced deeply. "This is not your ending. It is your beginning." The next morning, Mason found himself returning to the ruins again, not out of grief, but out of something new, a stirring. He knelt and picked up that charred beam. Its edges crumbled, but the centre was solid, almost stone-like. In that moment, a single thought broke through the heaviness. Maybe I can start again, not alone, not by force, but with God rebuilding what he could not. Over the next days, small signs of grace appeared. A former client stopped by with coffee and an envelope containing enough money to buy tools. A friend offered to help clear rubble. A local parish set up a fundraiser. A young apprentice he once mentored reached out saying, "If you rebuild, I'll help you. You taught me everything." And slowly, brick by brick, day by day, the impossible began to look possible. But the real rebuilding happened inside Mason. As he worked, he discovered something unexpected. The fire had not stolen his passion. It refined it. His designs became more thoughtful. His work carried new humility, new meaning. Instead of focusing on perfection, he began focusing on purpose. 1 year later, a new workshop stood in the same place. But inside, a beam from the fire hung on the wall. A reminder that the grace of God doesn't erase scars. It transforms them. Visitors often asked, "Why keep a burned piece of wood here?" Mason would smile and say, "Because it reminds me that my life didn't end when everything collapsed. God rebuilt me stronger than before." We all experience moments when something in our life burns down, literally or figuratively. A relationship ends. A job disappears. A dream crumbles. A failure humiliates us. A season we depended on comes to a sudden stop. And in those moments, it feels final, hopeless, irreversible. But God never sees ruins as the end. He sees them as raw material for resurrection. Sometimes what collapses needed to collapse. Sometimes what burns needed to burn. Not because God wanted us to suffer, but because He wanted to make space for something more beautiful, more authentic, more deeply rooted in Him. What we call the end is often God whispering, "Let me build something new." So if you're standing today in front of the ashes of something you loved, listen carefully. This is not your ending. This is your rebuilding season. Your strength may feel small. Your hope may feel fragile. Your hands may feel empty. But what you cannot yet see is the God who stands beside you, gathering every broken piece, every wound, every disappointment, and saying, "Let me make something new out of this." Do not fear the ashes. Do not fear beginning again. You are not starting from zero. You are starting from wisdom, from experience, from grace that has already carried you through fire. And God, the master builder, the restorer of souls, is already at work. And when the new chapter rises from the ruins, you will look back and say, "I was not destroyed, I was transformed."